Good afternoon and welcome to the Landscape Middle East Conversations that Shape the Region. Well, this is the first webinar in our 2026 series, and on behalf of the entire team here at Landscape Middle East, we thank you for joining us. Well, my name's Phil Higgins and I'll be your host, but it is my delight to also introduce you to our co-host today, Annie Baillie. Annie's the Design Director at Place Dynamix and is supporting this entire webinar series. We're really pleased to have her professional insight helping to shape these conversations. Well, our aim in this series is very simple, and that's to bring the industry together and talk about key aspects of landscape establishment that genuinely affect how landscape is designed and built and performs over right across the Middle East. It's not just how they look in award-winning presentations. Today's session is titled Sustainability from the Ground Up. And we chose this topic deliberately because it's where sustainability fails below the surface, and it doesn't matter how good the drawings look. We talk a lot about sustainability constantly in the industry, and it appears in every brief and every pitch and every strategic document, but too often the conversation stays comfortably above the surface, and that's quite literally. Well, when we were framing this session, we actually came up with 3 different subtitles because they were all very relevant. We thought about, a subtitle that said, because sustainability still starts below the surface, or what sustainability looks like after value engineering. We also thought that, talking green is easy, making it work is really hard. While all of these are really true, we decided that we would structure the conversation around these 3 subjects. Well, today we'll just be stripping back to the basics, where we want to talk about sand, soil, water, and have a very honest discussion about where projects succeed, where they struggle, and why so many well-intended schemes begin to lose performance once they move from design intent to site reality through whether it be through value engineering or long-term operations. Well, this won't be a theoretical discussion because we are joined today by a panel of professionals who genuinely know their field. Together, we'll be covering soil science, irrigation, intelligence, design consultancy, and the integration of project delivery. Over this next hour, we hope to explore what sustainability actually looks like below the surface and the tools, the systems, and the early decisions that quietly determine whether landscapes thrive or struggle in the years to come. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to our panelists that are joining us today. We have Ralph Stile, the managing partner for Zeoplant. Ralph is an engineering or an industry legend when it comes to soil and health or soil health and the performance of soil in this territory and long-term landscape sustainability is a wealth of knowledge. Also joining us, we have Rami Khalil, the area manager for Hunter Industries, one of the region's leading suppliers of irrigation systems, and he will bring his expertise in irrigation strategy, water intelligence, and systems performance to our discussion. We're also joined by Namir Muta, the co-founder and director at METS, who focuses on integrated delivery thinking and how sustainability moves beyond theory into practical implementation. And finally, from Saudi Arabia, the lovely Pauline Nujaim, the head of landscape and associate director at WSP, offering her perspective on the design intent, specification decisions, and the realities of value engineering across the regional projects. Well, we truly have a lot to cover today, so perhaps we could just go through the room. I'd love you guys just to say hi. So let me start with my co-host, Annie. Good to see you here with us today.
Hi, Phil. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm a landscape architect by degree with Place Dynamix. I'm the design director, and I'm thrilled to be joining Phil and the team on this webinar series. It's never too late to learn, and this is what I'm hoping by meeting specialist professionals in our region, and obviously learning some more from them to hopefully translate into my work as a landscape designer. So thanks, Bill. Back to you.
Wonderful. Rami, you're joining us there with Hunter. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's excited to be here, and I'm honored to be with such an amazing professional and veteran group. Having worked here in UAE and the GCC region for over 2 decades in landscape and irrigation, I'm humbled to be part of this great group. Thank you.
Great. Ralph, why don't you say hi?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. My pleasure to be here. And I'm very much looking forward to have some interesting discussions over the next 1 hour. Thanks.
Wonderful. And Namir, sitting there,
I'm here. Hello, everybody. It's very good to be here with you today. This is the first webinar of many, hopefully. Hoping that we can discuss some issues that are of interest of all of us. So thanks again, and looking forward for good knowledge sharing today.
Well, you are right about that, because this is the first of a series. We are planning to have one webinar each month on various subjects, and I'll fill you a little bit more about that later. But thank you for joining us, Namir. Pauline.
Hi,
everyone. Nice to join us. You kicked into Saudi Arabia this year, so hopefully you've got a lot of Saudi Arabia stories to contribute today.
Exactly. Thank you, Philip. And hi, everyone. Excited to be part of this discussion and really looking forward for this upcoming seminar.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us today, the panelists and those that are sitting watching us. It's great. We will be recording this, and we will be sharing it with you. So if you have to leave part way, or if you've got other people that you find that this would be of interest to, then we ask you to please share it. Well, as we go through this discussion today, the panelists will be talking about various aspects of the subject. But if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A on the platform there to send a question, and we'll be reviewing this. We have allocated some time at the end to get back to some of those questions. And so if you've got any hard-hitting questions for our panel to answer, then please fire them away. We'll do our best to get an answer for those questions to you. Well, let's commence. We have a lot to unpack. I'm just going to kick off the panel discussion with one question, but then the lovely Annie Baillie is going to take over the rest. So, guys, you're in for a treat. She is a very, very tough reporter. I was very impressed at the Landscape Middle East Conference last year. She really kicked butt with her panel. It was a panel that was almost like it was a TV show. It was really well done. So we look forward to what you can contribute, Annie. But Ralph, I want to start with one question for you, if you don't mind, and and that is that from your experience, why is soil, or in this case mostly sand, but why is that terrain still one of the most underestimated components in landscape sustainability? And I want to also add to that, at what stage does the decision about what to do with the soil usually go wrong? Is it something that's not addressed during design or overlooked in specification, or is it just ignored during the construction process?
Well, let me just start with the first part of your question, and I'd like to give you just a very trivial answer why it's underestimated, undervalued. First of all, it's not seen; it's under the surface. Another point is, whatever you spend as a client, you can't show off. If you're planting beautiful exotic trees, pine trees, whatsoever, everybody can see it. And a third point for this question is a very significant one. It's costly. So, and combining these three factors together, this is, well, I think it's my answer to your question, at least to the first part of your question. The second part is where you ask at which stage decisions go wrong. I think this is a little bit more complex, because it starts already with the budgeting of a project. If you want to have a certain quality of soil conditioners, soil additives, amendments, whatsoever, you need to provide a certain budget for that. At the end, and we're discussing this for years now, if not for decades with contractors, you cannot expect the contractors to pay the extras and to pay the particular soil additives, for example, in our case, on behalf of the client without getting paid. At the end, we realize very often that soil additives in particular are mixed into the soil mix. Yeah, so there is no certain bill of quantity. There's no certain bill item. So the contractor, at the end of the day, he struggles to price the project correctly as per the recommended rates. Because if he would price the project correctly, he won't be the cheapest and he would get the job. So it's, at the end of the day, a very tricky game from the very beginning, where we always keep telling our clients, please, if you want to save water, for example, at the end of the day, and you operate and maintain your projects, you need to pay money for it. And at the end, it's always the same. Sustainability, everybody wants to be sustainable, but sustainability costs a few dirhams extra, or reals, or wherever you're listening from. At the end of the day, and this is the biggest question and the biggest hurdle what we're always coming from. Another thing is then during the specifications and during the design. So the specifications, we realize very often, they're not clear enough. Yeah, they are not clear enough. Even during the evaluation process or during the submittals, people... there is a lack of knowledge and a lack of deep knowledge of certain criteria for particular products. And so this leaves a very big room for the contractor at the end of the day, who at the end, he wants to build the project at the least cost, but most of the cases on the burden of the client.
Just a quick question, Ralph. Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry. For the purpose of everyone, so that we're all understanding on the same page, define the difference between a soil additive and a soil amendment product. What is the difference between the two? Because I think you just mentioned lack of understanding. I think there is a grave misunderstanding about the difference between the two and what that results in.
I think there is no difference between an amendment or additives. At the end, it's just formulation and phrases. Some consultants or some clients call it additives. Others call it amendments. At the end of the day, it's just a product mixed into the soil. And we all know the quality of our soil, what we are facing here in the Middle East. We're planting, unfortunately, in pure sand. And this sand, it requires additives. It requires organic additives, which is, in the meantime, common sense. Everybody is fully aware of it. And you need to have a certain sort of compost in the soil, which has no organics at all. So this is one of the, I would say, most common and recognized amendments as well. But everything else, whether it's mineral additives, whether it is even chemical additives, this is all under the same range, amendments and additives.
Thank you. Well, we can't just look at soil in isolation. It is obviously a major component of the success of our landscapes. But I'm going to shift the direction slightly across to Rami and include irrigation in this. Because, Rami, we've talked about we hear a lot about irrigation efficiency, particularly when it comes to sustainability targets. And we also talk about irrigation intelligence. So similar question to you. Please explain the difference, please.
That's a great question. Let's take a step back and talk about irrigation efficiency. I'm going to be very, very concise here. So irrigation efficiency is about a percentage of how much of the water applied to the plant actually reached to the plant root zone and was beneficial and used by the plant. And that percentage KPI is irrigation efficiency, governed by several factors, such as the water pressure and the devices used and the operational performance of the system. Irrigation intelligence, on the other hand, it's a bit farther than that. It talks about collecting data from the site during operations, such as weather data or soil moisture data, and using artificial intelligence and smart models to calculate and readjust the irrigation time, and the irrigation percentage based on such data acquired. Efficiency, how well did we design to actually apply water on the root zone itself without losses here and there. And intelligence, it's more of an interaction between sensors and the smart control system that we manage those sensors.
Okay, great. So I guess in when you and Ralph come together as suppliers of soils or soil efficiency, it requires something like zeoplants to be able to retain moisture in order to reduce the amount of irrigation we're using. But we actually need those sensors, don't we, that intelligence to be able to monitor the retained moisture in the soil, which will then dictate how much water we actually need to use. So, all right, good. I like the way this is going. I'm going to pass over to Namir now. So ask you, where do you see the biggest gap between design intent and constructed reality in irrigation?
This is a big question, and with a very simple answer. It's during execution. So we always design projects up to the highest level using the highest technology product and techniques. Then during installation, things starts going wrong, where we always start cutting corner during installation, not to evaluate exactly what we're installing. It is as per the design on paper, but when it comes to the field, we're deviating a lot. So that's why it's always, as we're talking sustainability, it's nice to design a sustainable system, but it's much more challenging to implement sustainability on the ground. So this is the major issue. So in brief, during construction and in the worst case scenario during operation and maintenance. So this is very brief.
Thank you for that. Pauline, obviously as a fellow designer, given everything that we've just heard from Ralph, Rami and Namir, how do you feel explaining the value to clients? Do you really feel like you need to justify using additives, using irrigation efficiency technology, and using basically the top end of design in irrigation systems itself? Do you really feel like you need to justify that to clients, or is it a given that irrigation is irrigation and it'll work no matter what?
Actually, not really. Yeah, there is some kind of challenge when we talk about anything that has implication on the cost, from irrigation to additives, etc. And I believe we need to change like the scenario here by really like whenever we want to address soil and irrigation, we don't introduce those only as technical items, but rather than more on performance investment. And we're having this kind of experience with some of our projects where we clearly, the client actually, it's coming from the client, where the client is actually asking to show life cycle impact of the system that we're putting in place. So this is kind of something very positive, where the clients are aware that anything that we plan, anything that we put in here, we're not talking only about cost, but we're looking also about the performance. So by putting a clear strategy from early beginning of the project and planning of the project, and also the early design stages of that project, we're not only saving money at short term, but we're saving money at the long term. And this is where we believe we're actually addressing sustainability when we talk about life cycle impact of the systems that we're proposing.
I think you've touched on two really important points here. So performance expectation and life cycle impact. These are post handover. So forgive me if I'm wrong in saying this. This is from my personal experience. When the project is handed over, it's a completely different team that takes it forward. And those teams, the difference between the design and the operations departments of that developer rarely get to speak together, rarely get to kind of knit that handover and understand the long-term objective. So this is important. I know I kind of want to steer this back to Ralph, actually. How do you see soil improvements directly relating to irrigation reduction? Because it's all interrelated. It's all interwoven in, we talk about design, we're talking about specification, we're talking about construction. But when it really comes down to it, to deliver on the performance expectation and the life cycle impact that Pauline has just mentioned, surely this is where your product really comes into play, because without it, there is potentially a shortfall in that performance expectation. So can you expand on that? Can you give us your insight into how you think ZeoPlant really helps to deliver in the future?
Absolutely, yes. See, first of all, we have to see the soil structure. Again, what kind of soil do we have? We have sandy soils. All these sandy soils, they have an extremely high infiltration speed of the water. No matter what modern irrigation systems you are using, you have a quick evaporation, you have a high percolation rate. And so it's in every soil, it's very important to find a balance between nutrient and moisture requirements. And I think this is the basics of horticulture as such. So it doesn't help you if you're flooding a place with lots of water, with over-irrigation. You're achieving exactly the opposite. You're not achieving what you want. At the end, also, you need to find the right mix and the right quantities of NPK, of nutrients, of minerals, and whatsoever. So from our perspective, what we do and what our product is doing, we reduce the infiltration speed of the water. Everybody knows, I keep explaining, even if somebody is not in our field and in our industry, you give water on a sand, you can see how quick the water drains through and how fast it disappears. So this is the first thing what you have to address if you're amending a soil and if you want to keep the soil more sustainable and also to provide more moisture to the plants. This is one thing. It's very often it's called we have to increase the water holding capacity of the soil. Yes, absolutely. But in the meantime, I'm always getting hesitant about the WHC, water holding capacity values, because we feel also that there is a very big misunderstanding and misconception about just this value alone, water holding capacity. Oh, somebody feels like, oh my, this product has a very high water holding capacity. Oh, that means it saves a lot of water. No, this is absolutely wrong. And just one example, I remember when I started ZeoPlant in 2002, 2003, there were still the polymers in the market, the acrylic polymers, copolymers, whatsoever, all the spongy stuff, byproducts of the petrochemical industry. The same stuff which is in Pampers nappies. So they absorb a lot of water, but the water cannot be released to the plants. This is why, after very few years, all these products had been banned completely here in the UAE because everybody saw they don't work. So again, water holding capacity is one aspect, but another aspect is definitely how you are changing the texture of the soil. And I think this has to be balanced, and it will be also balanced over time with the nature itself, because if you're having a healthy root growth, you are immediately, and you're not immediately, but you're automatically increasing the organic matter as well in the soil. The more roots you create, the more organic matter you have, and the more natural water holding you are having. Yeah, so you are creating a soil additive, soil additive by nature with a healthy growth.
Interesting. You talked a lot about water holding capacity. So I want to kind of hang on to that and shift across to Rami. Obviously, being from a hunter and a supplier of hardware, how is the industry responding to this? I mean, Ralph has made a very valid point that there are products that will retain moisture in the soil, but that moisture does need to be released to the plants. Then how does the hardware technology work with these additives? Because irrigation alone is not the solution, as we know. We need to retain water, but we also need to make sure that those plants are not getting too much. They're not being overwatered. So tell me about the technology now as it's changing, and how the hardware in the industry adjusts now to what we're finding, particularly in this region, that actually just planting in sand doesn't work, and that we need to make more use of these additives in order to have more successful plantations.
That's a great question. And did you all notice how Ralph had a sigh when he said sandy soil? And that's how hard it is to deal with sandy soil, right, Ralph? It's so quick to lose all of that water. So I share your sigh of sadness and frustration on the sandy soil. Yes, technologies now have developed in tremendous way in the last 5 or 10 years, where our irrigation control systems are intelligent enough to gather sufficient data from soil moisture sensors, from weather climate sensors. Even our flow meters and flow sensors can help us evaluate how much water we are spending on a certain zone. All of that together, combined with the information we receive from the additives on the soil, will help the irrigation system to readjust and to recalibrate automatically on its own based on such conditions, either by weather data or from the soil data. Of course, human involvement is very important. Humans have to be involved at certain points of time during the operation and life cycle of the project, where they take actual spot measurements for soil content in different depths, whether we have a shallow ground cover root zone or a deep palm tree root zone. All of this interaction between the operators of the irrigation and landscape projects and the automatic devices that calibrate and obtain that data is very important. One thing I always tell my colleagues and friends and customers is that irrigation and landscape is not a drop and forget. It's something very important to have really high caliber and continuous maintenance. And I think I agree with Pauline when she talked about performance investment. We need to have KPIs, key performance indicators, along the entire life cycle of the project to really monitor how we are doing. Are we achieving our saving targets? Are we achieving our operational targets? And this keeps the momentum going to extend the life cycle and justify the investments that Ralph and Annie talked about earlier.
I'd like to get Pauline in on this. I want to stay on this subject for a moment. From a designer's perspective, and being in charge of the creation of landscape specifications, what's very apparent is that with the likes of Ralph and his product, with Rami and with Namir, in irrigation specialism, I must confess our specification probably doesn't knit soil amendment and irrigation together to be able to optimize, the outcome for both. I think they're both dealt with in isolation as, soil additives here and irrigation over here. They're not in the same section of a landscape specification. So, how do you overcome this? How do you see this working? Do we need to make a change to the format of the specification to make allowance for soil additive when we're designing with irrigation?
Yeah, thank you, Annie, for this. I completely agree with you. We all know that at consultancy, sometimes we have standard source files for specs that we go for, and we use it. And unfortunately, this is not actually reflecting what happens on the ground, because we all know it's all depending on the climate, on the region we're working with. So I will talk from personal experience on that matter. The irrigation still have specific specification, but for the soil amendments, what we have created in-house in WSP, we have created dedicated section depending on the region we were dealing with, because we know most of our project in this region would require actually sand with amendments and additives to it. So we try to specify these kinds of approach while keeping allowing for ranges to be included. And this is all would be based on testing on ground. So testing on the actual project site, and accordingly there are certain ranges that the engineer should select based on the test result of the sands that we're dealing with. Again, this is for sand, this is for soil, but for the irrigation, it's still, we do propose the typical irrigation, depending on the strategy that we're following, the sections. This is what we follow usually.
Might come back to you about learning a bit more about your soil spec, because I think I could probably do with your professional insight. So we talked about soil retention, water retention within the soil, but let's address something on the surface now, because, and I'm targeting this to Namir. When we're designing landscapes, we're ordinarily designing for, the visual intent, the visual aesthetic, meeting the client's overall vision of what they want to achieve. But are we just designing irrigation blindly? The reason why I ask this is because all plants have different evapotranspiration rates, and surely, local conditions prevail in this. We can't just design an irrigation system on standard, because we're using a variety of different plant materials. So would you say that actually on-site weather sensors are equally important or very important, to be able to monitor water usage by the plants themselves? And, we've talked a lot about water draining away, but actually water evaporating from our landscape. So what can you tell us about that?
This is important, Annie, because yes, the design is usually based on plant water requirements. Now there are two options to do that: either to go very specific in the design, or to just base the design on the peak demand based on the prevailing weather condition or the prevailing specifications that we have. And here there is a question mark about the prevailing specifications. We can discuss it later if we have the time. So basically, the design, going back to the basics of irrigation. Irrigation is just to put back the water lost by the plant evapotranspiration. So we have to know how much the plant is losing in order to put the irrigation. So that's why we have to always know how much we want to apply. Now, taking irrigation design based on certain peak requirement is okay as the design stage, because you cannot know what's going to happen later. So we design on the peak water requirement and we stop here. And this is the major issue. While we have to continue while implementing the irrigation system. Yes, the design is to give 10 liters per meter square for grass, but do we really need to give 10 liters per meter square for grass? Here it comes the integration between the irrigation, the soil, and the soil additive, soil amendments, what is there on the system. And coming back to Pauline, also what she mentioned, the specifications of the irrigation is different from the specifications of the soil. So at the end, you are stuck to, you are obliged to design based on the water requirements. But my point is, we always stop here. We don't continue after installation. So in order to be, as I mentioned before, you cannot design a sustainable system only, you have to implement a sustainable system. And to implement a sustainable system, you have to monitor what you're doing on the site. So this will go by the actual irrigation requirement based on the weather conditions, based on soil moisture sensors, based on whatever, and having the correct irrigation technology to deal with these changes. So we designed on a peak, but we don't need to apply the peak. We always apply what the plants need and based off what we're measuring. I can talk for hours on this, but I will make it a little bit brief. And at the same time, I would like to mention something. During the operation of the system, many things changes on the ground. It is the type of plants, the canopy of the plant, all these things will change. So we need to keep monitoring. And this is what we call irrigation auditing, that maybe we'll discuss it in a different part of the webinar.
Okay, so I think from my perspective as a designer, it's very easy to simply design with a palette, but actually a little more careful consideration of plant typologies probably would benefit, right? Whilst we're on this subject, and then we can expand on this, then I'm probably going off piste a little bit, but hydrozoning is something that's talked about quite a bit in terms of sustainability targets. In your experience, how often does that actually get applied? Because you're talking about the efficiency of irrigation and giving the plants the water that they need. Often we're asked to design with more desert adapted species. So naturally we're trying to use plants that we believe use less water. But how often do you find actually that we're just putting a blanket volume across the ground level planting?
No, actually, we're not putting a blanket volume. We're basing this volume, which is applied based on the plants that are being planted. And yes, you are right. Hydrozoning is very important because we usually in the irrigation design, what we usually do, we separate our system based on the plant type and the plant requirement. And also, on top of the hydrozoning, we can monitor this with the irrigation scheduling because this will change over time. So there are different factors, and I'm talking only from the design perspective. But now, if you want to go more into the application devices and emission devices, you have a lot of other things there that will help the hydrozoning, the pressure compensation things, the pressure regulation, the low precipitation rate, all these things, they are combined together. But maybe I'll leave this to Rami. He can explain it better than me because he has all the mean to for the application. I'm trying to be as much as possible general and theoretical while applying this theory on the ground.
I couldn't agree more. Namir. Hydrozoning is the ABC of irrigation design. I don't think I've seen a project without hydrozoning for more than 15 years now. It's very important. Without it. Hydrozoning now has become mainstream. It's been used by a lot of, or maybe the circle around me are all like professional good designers. But irrigation design starts with hydrozoning. It takes into account soil type, plant type, water requirement, geography, sunshade, exposure, structural constraint, if it's a rooftop or a terrace. So yeah, hydrozoning is very important, like you emphasize, and also Namir. And when it comes to the products that are really in high efficiency, pressure regulation and low flow. That's the yoga of an irrigation system. If you manage high pressures, if you have really good and good pressure for the system without high pressure, if we protect the outlets with check valves, allowing water to seep out and ruin streets and ruin pavements, and of course low volume of applications. You mentioned local adaptive plant species and the heat tolerant and maybe salt halophyte tolerant species.
Yeah.
All of these are great choices to be used, and we can hydrozone. We can segment our irrigation network during design to cater for every different type of plant. So kudos to all of you. You guys have really hit the spot on every point.
Thank you, Rami. If I can just steer back again, back to soil amendments. Ralph, tell me, how often do you see soil quality being compromised through value engineering? Because throughout all of this discussion, we're understanding the importance of soil amendments to help retain moisture, to help retain nutrients. This must be something that you face quite directly as a supplier of a soil amendment. So tell us, where do you see it happening? How frequently do you see it happening?
Unfortunately, very, very often, whereby I would say also clients are a little bit learning in the last years. So it's I would say in about 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was quite common that, one of the first things and products which were value engineered out was the soil additive. Oh, what is this for a position? Too much money. Let's cut it. So it was quite easy just to delete it. So in the meantime, I think there is a little bit more understanding, and thanks God we are dealing with many clients in the meantime. Particularly in Abu Dhabi, but also in Saudi Arabia, with an increasing number now, who are fully aware about the consequences such a product will be value engineered out. This is one thing, and another thing is definitely also we spoke about the performance expectation. This is for us in the last, I would say, 5, 6 years. It is our biggest selling point. And to convince clients, because we are sending our people to the sites. There's not a single tree planted without one of our supervisors being present and making sure the product is mixed in the correct depth at the correct ratio. After all this is done, and then I would like to jump back maybe 5 minutes ago on this discussion we had with Pauline, Rami, and Namir when it comes to implementation is one thing. Let's say we are talking about best case scenario. The best irrigation system is applied, the soil additive is applied, everything fine. But now comes the triggering point from the construction team. Now it's going to the operation team. Unfortunately, in most of the cases, we are the ones who are going back to the site and ask the consultant, please, can you help us to convince the contractor to reduce the central control of the irrigation system? Because you don't need 15 minutes runtime in summer for a lawn, reduce it to 7, etc., etc. So if we don't do that from our perspective, nobody does it in very few cases. So there is a big lack and a big gap between design, supervision, implementation, but then operation and maintenance. Because operation and maintenance, they are the biggest beneficiaries of all these systems. So they have to realize and they have to use what is already there. So I think this is a very, very important point. This is why I love the idea of performance expectation, because the best thing you can convince a client to spend a little bit more money is that where you can show them, look, this is what we did for you in this project. You want to have the same in your other projects, or you want to go back in the old century and have the conventional old ways and save money on the short term, but pay more on the long term.
I think I'm going to hand over to Pauline on this, because Ralph, you just touched on a very important point, and this was, where we can do everything up to handover, but then when we're handing over to the O&M team, what do we learn from that? So, Pauline, are there been any projects that you've worked on, and you don't feel like you need to name them specifically, but anything recently that you've experienced, you've gone back and had a look at and thought, that probably didn't work, or why has it happened like that, or that that was never the vision, it's kind of changed. Is there anything that you can draw upon from that revisit to then utilize that in your designing going forwards?
Sure. Actually, it's also talking from experience. Luckily, specifically in KSA, we're leading on 2 major projects where we're designing those projects, and we're also leading on the construction and supervision. So this is the best thing that could happen, because this is where mainly lessons learned are being built, and this is where we build on the experience of the site, and we don't stay only behind our computers and our stations just designing on paper and talking about different ideas and approaches, but we see actually what's being implemented on site. And yes, based off lessons learned are not only in terms of the softscape species that are being selected, or the different, what we were talking about, the different hydrozoning that we're creating and the segmentation that we're creating within the softscape, but it's also related to the hardscape part. When it comes to the irrigation, The irrigation is, in terms of strategy and in terms of application, is more straightforward, because we know that we have different typologies, and to which typology and strategy we need to follow. And it all falls in terms of reducing the volumes of irrigation, regulating the pressure, as Rami has just mentioned. So yeah, we were lucky on some of the project, but unfortunately most of the other project, we don't have a say when it comes to implementation and construction. So our responsibility and our role is that shouldn't stop at design approval, and we need to make sure that this performance and those KPIs that we foresee for that project are clearly highlighted in the documentation that we provide, such as the drawings and the actual specification. So by doing this, we support the design intent during construction. We ensure that minimum support is given during a construction, and we will support also informed decision by the engineers and the team leading on the construction and supervision role.
I really like that. If you allow me, I really like that thought, Pauline, because you can't imagine how many times I've seen a project design spec that says there shall be a sprinkler. So stop. Is it a plastic sprinkler? Is it a brass sprinkler? Is it a 4-inch pop-up? Is it a 5-meter radius? Being specific is what all about. The devil is in the detail, right? So having really a concise explanatory document that gets protected during design and protected during supervision, and then inherited and carried forward as performance KPIs to operation is really goal. If we can maintain that continuity, we're gonna hit the holy grail.
I think also from my experience on a couple of projects, I've been quite strict with the contractors in developing their operations and maintenance manuals to the point of sheer annoyance. They all smile later, going, "Oh, thank you, you've helped us develop this very intensive O&M manual." But a lot of straightforward assumptions are dropped into this manual, and I think you really have to scrutinize. And what I'm alluding to is that when you have the advantage of being appointed for site supervision, the client does benefit from that. This isn't just, hours on site observing concrete being poured or sweet soil being put into planters. This is about making sure that actually you have that connection with the future operation. What I'm kind of steering around to, and I want to speak to Namir about this, is that you touched on the auditing, Namir, of irrigation at a later date. If you have the opportunity to help develop that O&M manual, by the contractor, you can actually get that audit written in, so that when that document is handed over to the operations manager after handover, that becomes something that is a requirement. Whether it's an annual audit or whether it's an audit, 5 years down the line, at least it's documented, at least it's there. So, Namir, just tell us, very quickly, what are you engaging in at the minute in terms of irrigation auditing, and what are you seeing the benefit of that from?
Okay, now what you mentioned is very important regarding the operation and maintenance manual, and this shall be a part of the handing over of the project. And part before the contractor is released from the project, all the DLP, everything, this shall be done. Now, this is coming back to irrigation auditing, as we were discussing before. So we design a system which is top-notch design, everything, and then we implement. Then comes to operation and maintenance, which is always as Ralph also mentioned, the main issue starts there. So a system, it's like an irrigation system or even planting. It's like a car. Every year you need to do some maintenance. So you have to upgrade your software sometimes. So this is irrigation audit. What we do in irrigation audit, we go to major projects and evaluate the current situation. Is it being implemented? Is the system being operated as per the design, as per it was has been constructed? This is one. Then, is the original design still valid based on the current situation of the project. I'll give you what do I mean by that. It's the design is valid, but is the irrigation schedule, how you irrigate, when to irrigate, it's still valid based on the plant growth, the shaded areas, maybe they added some new hardscape, all these things. So we reevaluate the system, and we give all the recommendations for the operation and the maintenance and the owner of the project, what to rectify and how to change the way they operate. And this in turn will save the water on the long term, and it will save on the maintenance cost on the longer term. And what we always suggest that this auditing has to be specified regularly on every project, especially when we're talking about big commercial projects, because sometimes you save money in the beginning and you pay a lot of money later during operation. And audit will help you continue working on a good operational budget, and it will maintain your sustainable design. So coming back to sustainability, it will maintain your sustainable design into action. So this is in brief what we're having in auditing.
Hey, fantastic. Great discussion, guys. We really want to keep this to the 1 hour. And there are quite a few questions from our audience that we'd like to get to. But it's been very interesting discussion today. But audience, if you have some questions, send them to us. We may get a chance to get to them, but there are quite a few. And there's a lot for Ralph. Ralph, you're very popular today. There's a lot of questions. Let me just tell you, Ralph is a little bit like Tom Cruise in that movie Night and Day. You remember that movie? With Zeoplant, without Zeoplant. With Zeoplant, without Zeoplant. Without. You have to remember that he is Zeoplant all the way. But Ralph, there's a couple of questions for you, and some general about what you've been discussing. But there is one very interesting question here from Michael, and I mean the questions that he asked simply come back to regulations. Are there regulations associated to products like yours, Ralph, or what are the regulations associated to irrigation today? Or is it just one of those things that is left up to the designer to implement or the developer to implement?
Well,
and anyone can jump in on these questions, not just Ralph.
Well, this is actually a really very interesting question. And to be honest with you, we're struggling on this particular issue at the moment with Abu Dhabi Quality and Conformity Council for the last couple of months. And we started these discussions already about 8 years ago with them. So because, yes, I agree, there should be better regulations from the government authorities from the very beginning. At this moment, for example, any product, as long as it's not super toxic, can come into the market and claim, oh, I can save irrigation water. I'm a moisture retaining soil additive. So, but who is actually really checking the quality? Who is looking after the performance? Who is looking after the reaction in the soil? Because at the end of the day, we are not planting in a soil additive. This is what it's mentioning by the name already. It's an additive. It's a mix into the soil. So you need to look into these products also. How do they perform in our sandy soil? Because this is what we have. So you can bring anything from around the world, but still, if it works in Australia or if it works in Sweden or if it works in the US, that doesn't mean automatically it works here in the GCC countries as well. So that's a very basic thing, which unfortunately, the reason for that is that all these products, I mean, it's a niche product. And when we started with Zeoplant 24 years back, I mean, we were looked at like what these guys are doing. I mean, nobody needs these products. None of these products ever worked. So it was always like some sort of a black sheep, nobody wanted to touch it and it's costly. So in the meantime, yes, it became norm to many clients and developers that because they see the performance, but still the laws and the regulations for such products is still definitely not sufficient enough.
And then at the end, Ralph, you have to say with zeoplant, without zeoplant, with zeoplant. That's how you, from now on, that's how you have to finish. I think it's really cool. All right. So very good answer. Are there standards that sort of govern the design? Pauline, maybe that's a good question for you. Are there standards as a designer of landscapes and involved in irrigation? Guys, are there standards that you work to, or is this a very broad subject that just, every landscape designer is different?
Again, Philip, I'll talk from personal experience. Our standards, we usually follow the general international standards from American and British standards, but it all, which main aim and at the core should be the performance targets to make sure that whatever standards we put in place should really answer the performance target we have for those projects.
For irrigation part, it depends on the city, country, and the emirates. So some cities and some emirates do update their general specification for irrigation network on every year or every 2 years, while other cities haven't done so in 10 years or 12 years. Countries like Qatar, for example, Doha, they update them regularly. They have, high rate of updating their specs. In UAE, different cities. In Saudi also, depending on the client. And that may be the reason why sometimes we see different water requirements per different plant types, per country, per city. Although the general overall weather in the GCC region is kind of similar, not, big variance differences, except if it's on facing water or inland. But there was an interesting question by one of our attendees about humidity and the evaporation rates. So in irrigation, quickly, it's evapotranspiration. So it's the evaporation from the soil and the surface of the ground and the transpiration from the plant together, evapotranspiration, ET. And it's an equation, one of the scientific equations we follow. It has 7 meteorological data. One of them is humidity and temperature and rain and solar radiation and the wind direction and the wind speed. The highest the highest percentage weight component of all of the 7 variables in the ET formula is solar radiation. It constitutes over 95% weight of the entire formula. So if you have a lot of sun, direct sunlight, high sun radiation, then your evapotranspiration rate gets higher, and that means the plant is, I like the word drinking. It drinks more water from the soil reservoir. So that's why we have to replenish that emptied soil reservoir with water. Hopefully by using zeoplant's amendments, then we can replenish even less because it's being held more in the soil.
There's also an interesting question, sort of bringing it to the other perspective, that soil improvement can be achieved naturally without chemical fertilizers by using microbial soil amendments, which enhance beneficial microorganisms, earthworms, organic matter. I mean, we do this all around the world, but how practical is that here in the Gulf region? When we're talking about sandy deserts, when we're building landscapes on top of, is it realistic to be totally reliant on these natural alternatives?
I might say something about that. Look, the soil that we're planting into inherently drains very fast. So hence the reason why we're talking with Ralph about soil additives, and we're talking about reducing irrigation, because we don't want the percolation rate to be too rapid to leach through the nutrients. What we're very, very bad at here is utilizing natural leaf matter to biodegrade down and break down into the soil, because for some reason or other, a lot of developers prefer to see a lot of that leaf litter removed. And I've seen people, maintenance personnel raking it up and putting it in a plastic bag. I'm like, no, please leave it alone. Let it break down. Let it naturally enrich the soil. Let it build a better soil structure. But it's just not the done thing here. I think we've got into a mentality of manicuring and making sure that everything looks, pristinely clean. And actually soil would benefit from, this natural breakdown of matter to improve the soil quality. We also know from leaching that we have to replenish fertilization a lot faster. We also, given the very, very harsh climatic conditions, we need to be very specific about what we're feeding the plants to make sure that they're getting the NPK that they need according to that species requirement. So kind of getting back to, is it viable to use more natural systems or natural products? Yes, but that would take some considerable time to see evidence of. And it also takes a great deal of change in our mentality of what is visually acceptable. And I think that's probably a bigger challenge to us rather than actually implementing, natural products into the soil. That can be quickly incorporated. But changing the psychology of what we deem to be aesthetically pleasing is deeply ingrained.
I guess it's also a matter of, sort of giving consideration to the fact that the leaves may well be removed, or, in the maintenance of the landscape, certain conditions may not be considered. And so these have to be taken into consideration within your design. Well, we have hit the 1 hour mark, so I don't want to go much longer. But there are still some fantastic questions. I see one there from Born Heidedel. I interviewed Born this week. Stay tuned for the Landscape Middle East magazine next month. Some great articles there. We're really pushing hard on further developing the magazine as a channel to connect and communicate with you. I figured Born's question is a little bit too deep for us to really get into, and it may end up taking the rest of another hour. But there are some really important points, and I'll share these questions, and anyone that's asked a question that we haven't got back to you yet, we'll drop you a line, and we appreciate your input. But fantastic discussion. There was somebody that said, sorry, I just had to go, but you guys have only just touched the surface, and I'm sure that is the case. There's only so much that you can talk in 1 hour, and so I'd just like to keep to move forward and to wrap this up. It is the first session in a series. We have so much more to discuss. This is just a teaser so that we can start thinking more about the industry, the landscaping industry. And if you have any questions, I'm sure anyone from this panel would be keen to support. And so you're welcome to send us a message here on the Q&A if you want to hear particularly from any one person here. But we really appreciate you joining us today as an audience. It's been great to have you on board. But I would like to say thank you to our panel. Great discussion today, guys. Really appreciate it. Pauline, Namir, Ralph, Rami, and Annie for co-hosting with me. You guys have been fantastic. I've really enjoyed listening to what you've had to say. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring this webinar to a close. It's only 1 hour. I think we could continue talking for 2 or 3 with these guys, especially with Mr. Zeo Plant here, and that guy. He could just keep talking all day, and Rami's full of knowledge. I'm sure we'll get them back again, and we can have a part 2 on this very interesting subject of irrigation, soil and sand. Thank you for joining us today, all of the audience. Thank you for taking the time. I know it's Ramadan, so it's the reason why I want to keep it to this 1 hour. We look forward to you joining us in our next session next month. Stay tuned. We'll keep you informed. With that, we are scheduling it now, and those details will be forthcoming. But stay tuned, and we look forward to having you with us again next month. So have a great evening. Thank you very much.